Hey ladies, I just wanted to make a video on how I sleep trained my baby. He had his first complete sleep through the night last night. He's almost 9 weeks old now. And I'm not a professional or an expert by any means. This is my first baby. I figured this out on my own. And I just want to share what I did because maybe it'll help somebody. So the first few weeks that he was alive, of course, I was getting up through the night to feed him every 2 to 3 hours. I fed him on demand, but once his pediatrician cleared it and said let him sleep as long as he wants to, I did, which ended up still only being every 2 to 3 hours, and I would get up and feed him. But what I did is I took note, and I actually wrote it down. Well, I didn't write it down, I put it in an app, but I actually documented what times he usually got up to eat during the night, and that was step one. And what I did once I started noticing a pattern was that normally he would get up and eat around 12. He actually had a pretty good stretch in the beginning. He had about a 4-hour stretch. He would sleep from like, let's see, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then he'd get up at 11 or 12. So a 4 to 5 hour stretch. So if you're not getting that, I'm very sorry. But in the beginning, you know, once my pediatrician cleared it, he did slowly start to stretch that first stretch of the night to 4 to 5 hours. I really don't remember what I did before that happened because it did happen pretty quickly. But normally he would eat at 12, 2:30-ish, around 4, and then again around 6, 6:30, and then we would be up for the day, and then again he would eat every 2.5 hours. And I breastfed him for the first 3 weeks of his life, and that's pretty much when he was eating every 2 to 2.5 hours. So I formula feed now, so keep that in mind while I'm giving you this advice. If you're breastfeeding, you can still do this, everything that I'm suggesting. But yeah, your baby might eat a little bit more. They might cluster feed, do things like that. But when I talk about reducing feedings at all, instead of just, reducing it by a few ounces, you can just reduce your breastfeeding time by a few minutes. Again, like I said, I'm not an expert. That's just what I would think you'd be able to do. And I figured this out on my own. I'm a first-time mom. But anyways, the good thing about sleep training and about myself is I'm actually a dog trainer. That's what I do for work, for my job. And I work with a lot of behavioral cases, a lot of dogs who are bratty and don't listen, and I even work with aggression. But so I've come to kind of understand that, and I always related dogs to children, even though I didn't have any, just because it seemed like dogs need parenting, and that method or that mindset seemed to work for me. And so a lot of times I would advise to my clients, that the dog needs to adjust to the family, not the other way around. So, quit making accommodations for your dog and make your dog accommodate to you, so don't pet him every time he paws at you, don't always give him what he wants all the time. If you're not ready to, pet him or do whatever, don't, so anyway, I don't want to go on a long rant about what I do in my job, but basically, I always kind of related it to parenting. You don't always have to give in to your dog, and, your dog needs rules and structure and routine and etc. So anyways, I kind of applied that same mindset to my baby. And like I said, I was feeding him on demand for the first 3 to 4 weeks of his life until his pediatrician cleared it. Sorry, I got a little messenger pop up. I'm going to put it down here so it doesn't distract me. And then once she cleared it, I let him start stretching his feeding times if he was. If he dropped feedings at night or stretched farther, like that 7 to 12 stretch I told you about, I did not feed him in between then. And then those times that I noticed, the 12, 2:30, 4, etc. If he got up at 12 to eat and then he woke up again at 1, I didn't feed him. I would pat him and shush him and put a pacifier in and do all that stuff. But since he normally didn't seem to eat till 2:30, I would not wake up to feed him until 2:30. And so I kept him on a schedule throughout the night, and I did not deviate from that unless I absolutely felt that I had to. Like I really truly felt that he was hungry and screaming his head off because he really truly was starving, or something else was wrong or whatever the case might be. But for the most part, I didn't accommodate to my baby. I made my baby accommodate to me in certain ways. Of course, I wanted to sleep through the night from day one. But so I didn't get up to feed him, unless it was his designated eating time, I guess you could say. So I started with that. And then slowly, he started to kind of drop feedings on his own, or he would stretch longer or whatever the case might be. And then I would take note of that and I would document that for, probably a week to make sure it was consistent. And then again, once he started stretching that time, I did not feed him in between those times. And I just kept doing that. If he showed me he was capable of waiting till a certain time, I always made him wait till that certain time, unless I truly felt like, there was some special circumstance that night, which usually there wasn't. And even if he was screaming his head off, sometimes he was just screaming his head off to scream his head off. So, I learned my baby's cries and his routines and his normal way of behaving, and I just, kind of followed that. And if he was acting abnormal, I'd check his head for a fever, do all the normal things. But if he was okay, if he was fed and clean and safe, I just let him cry. And I didn't feed him till his designated eating times. So I did that. And then he ended up kind of weaning himself because I didn't feed him. I feel like it's because I didn't feed him in between, and I'm when he stretched something, I said, okay, this is your new, eating time. So I guess that's kind of similar to the core night, I guess. But that's what I did, just because that seemed to be common sense to me. But so again, that's what I did. And now once he reached 8 weeks old, I started to push things a little bit farther. We did have a rough few weeks there because he was transitioning to formula and all that. But at that point, he was getting up about every 4 hours to eat. I think he eliminated a couple of night feedings on his own. There was one night he only got up once to eat, and it was at 3 a.m. And so ever since that point, I did not get up before 3 a.m. to feed him, period. And so I did that again. I just kept adjusting as he adjusted, and I didn't allow him to backpedal unless it was like a, special circumstance, which again, like I said, didn't really often happen. But so once he was 8 weeks old, he was only getting up at 3 a.m. to eat. And now recently he's just dropped that last feeding. So now I'm not going to feed him anymore until his designated wake time. He always had a designated sleep time between about 7:30 to 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. And I always kept that the same. I never let him get out of his crib before 7 a.m., period. Even if he was crying, I would just shush him, pat him back to sleep, etc. With my husband and myself, we did not talk to him. Like when we got up in the night to feed him, we didn't talk to him. We didn't make eye contact with him. And we didn't change his diaper unless it was absolutely necessary, like he'd pooped or something. So that was the other thing, at night. I didn't get up a million times to put his pacifier back in, which wasn't always a problem. I often laid him down awake. And sorry, I'm just kind of throwing things in here because, I didn't write anything down. I'm just kind of telling you. But I always often laid him down awake, sometimes drowsy, but I never laid him down asleep, ever. If I needed to wake him up, I would burp him. That would usually wake him up just enough that he would be drowsy but awake. Or I would kiss him and tell him good night. That would wake him up a little bit. But I didn't feed his diaper. I didn't change his diaper unless I actually needed him awake, which was usually when I was breastfeeding him because, babies sometimes tend to be lazy on the boob. But that's the only time I changed him. Once he was on formula, I didn't change him unless it was necessary. But those are some things that we did during the night. So now during the day, once he hit 8 weeks, again, I started taking note of around what times he was eating during the day. And he was going about 3 to 3.5 hours. So he was getting up at 7 and then eating and wanting to eat again at about 10:30 and then 2 and then 5:30. and then his bedtime was around 7:30, 8 o'clock. So I took note of that again, and I just, at those times, I would just let him eat what he wanted because I was trying to document what his natural rhythm was. And then once I figured out what his natural rhythm was, then I would follow that. And if there was a certain day where that deviated, then I would just distract him until his designated eating time. And that's what I've been doing since he was 8 weeks old, and now he's about almost 9 weeks old. Actually, no, I've been doing that since he was 6 weeks old. But so during the day, that's what I would do. I don't follow wake times, and I don't follow eat, wake, sleep, because I noticed personally that it just pissed my baby off, and then he wouldn't nap. So, I tried it for a while, but then I ended up just throwing it out because I didn't feel it was working for us. So I never let him fall asleep on the bottle, but if he ate and then he wanted to go take a nap 10 minutes later, I let him. Sometimes, usually, I think first 4 or 5 weeks of his life, we did the normal recommended let your baby fall asleep, in a rocker or swing or whatever you want. Keep the noise going, keep the lights on, during the day to avoid the day-night confusion thing. And we did that. But once we were past that point, because, they recommend it till a certain age or whatever. Once we were past that point, then we started putting him down in the crib about 30 minutes after he ate if he wasn't sleeping already. We still sometimes let him sleep in the rock and play and on his play mat and, that different type of thing. But if he's not asleep by 30 minutes after he eats and we can tell that he's tired, not just because he's awake, but if we can tell that he's tired, we go lay him down in his crib awake. We'll put his pacifier in. We have a very thin blanket that we give to him and we put over him. But we lay him down awake, and he might fuss for 5 or 10 minutes. But again, because since birth, we've made a point to lay him down drowsy or awake. Now in 5 to 10 minutes, he can put himself to sleep. But so we did that. For a while, he napped whenever he wanted during the day. Again, I was checking his natural rhythms, and it seemed that about 30 minutes after he ate, he was ready to take a nap. So we'd lay him down for that nap, and now, I sort of work from home, but I also sort of work away from home. But right now, while I'm on maternity leave, I started when he was 6 weeks old, taking phone consultations for clients and things like that. And I can actually schedule those without interruption because I know his natural rhythms and about what time he's going to be sleeping. And I usually will schedule things. For you, it won't matter if you're not on a phone call, because you can do dishes while he's fussing or whatever. But for me, I needed quiet, so I would schedule that phone consultation about 30 minutes after he normally takes his nap. That way, if he fussed a little bit or it took some time to get him to sleep, I could still do that, and then I'd be able to have peace and quiet when I got on the phone. So again, we just took note of his natural rhythms and what he naturally tended to do, and on a consistent basis, and then we made that his baseline for everything. And we pretty much made him stick to that, and we knew that he was capable of that because most of the time he was doing it on his own. So that's what we did, and he just, like I said, weaned himself off the last feeding tonight, or last night. I didn't have to wean any feedings, but I did pretty closely follow the 12 hours by 12 weeks method. Most of what I did was pretty close to that. I didn't follow any one method to the T, but what I did was pretty close to that. And what they suggest is if you have to wean your baby, you reduce their feedings by 1/2 ounce every 3 nights until the feeding is gone. If you're breastfeeding, I would say instead of reducing it by a few ounces, just reduce your feeding time by a few minutes. But again, I don't breastfeed now, so best of luck to you, because I know sleep training when you're breastfeeding is harder. I will admit that. But that's what we did. And now I didn't technically nap train him, I don't think. I guess in a way I did, but now I have a pretty good idea of when he's going to eat, when he's going to sleep, etc. So I can kind of plan my day around that. Now on the 20th, it's the 7th today, on the 20th, he's going to be going to daycare and have no control over his schedule. So what I'm hoping to do and what I'm hoping will work is when I pick him up every day, I'm going to ask the daycare person, when was the last time he ate? If it was 4, then I might give him a little snack before bed. If, like, let's say he's really hungry and his bedtime is 8 o'clock, like I might feed him an ounce or something just to, kind of tie him over. But I'm going to keep that feeding every day at that, at that 5:30 p.m. where his normal rhythm and schedule was. And that's what I think is a positive about following your baby's natural rhythm, or at least for me it was, because now when he goes to daycare, if they feed him on demand, they're going to kind of feed him on his routine because that's when he's used to eating normally. And then on weekends, I'm going to keep him on his routine no matter what the daycare does, unless, somehow I find out consistently from the daycare people that his schedule has changed, but I doubt that's going to happen. Plus, it's also going to be hard to ask them to track that. So I'll never really know. But, I'm going to ask them when the last time he ate was. And then I'm going to give him a snack if I need to hold him over. But I'm going to feed him at that designated 5:30 p.m. Now, the daycare doesn't close till 6. And I usually work 9 to 5. So if by the time I get to daycare, it's, 6 o'clock and they say he ate at 5:30, then I go, okay, good. I don't have to feed him till bedtime. But that's just kind of what I plan on doing. And I hope that works. And during the night, I'm not going to get up to continue to feed him just because his daycare schedule was different. I know he ate. I know he's not starving. He ate at bedtime and I gave him the snack that he needed, or whatever. So I'm hoping that should work and it should be okay. But I'll keep you guys posted and I'll let you know. But that's how I sleep trained my baby. I know that some of you have babies with colic and reflux and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so it's a lot harder for you. I will say that I got a little bit lucky because I had a baby that was fairly normal. But yeah, I just worked really hard on not creating sleep crutches. We didn't bring him into the bed just because we were losing sleep. We still got up anyway and made him stay in the crib. Again, when we got up to feed him, we didn't talk to him. We didn't even make eye contact with him. We fed him, boom, we put him right back to bed. No diaper changing, none of that stuff, unless he was poopy. Things like that. We just didn't do anything to stimulate him whatsoever as much as possible during the night. And we just followed his natural rhythms and we made him stick to that because we knew he was capable of that because that's what he was doing on his own. And we just didn't deviate from that. Also, one more thing is the first 6 weeks of his life, I did not let him fall asleep in a wrap unless we were walking around at the store or something. But other than that, like at home, I didn't put him in a wrap just so I could get things done. I let him cry and I would just do what I needed to do if he was crying for no good reason. But I didn't put him in a wrap because I didn't want him to get dependent on needing a wrap to nap. Now I'll put him in a wrap because, we spent that first 6 weeks of his life making sure he didn't become dependent on it. So now, once in a while, I'll put him in a wrap if I just need him to take a nap. But that usually happens a couple times a week. But it doesn't happen every day. And it doesn't happen every nap. So that was my goal. But anyways, so that's what I did. I hope this was helpful to you. Like I said, basically what I did is I just took what made sense to me. I read all the methods, all the techniques. I tried almost everything. And if it didn't seem like it was working for me, I tossed it out. And what did seem like it was helping and making progress in my baby, I kept. So I didn't follow anyone method of sleep training, to the T consistently. And that's what I did and it worked for me. But so anyways, that's what I did. I hope it helps you and happy training, guys.